The Honourable Todd McLeay.
Thank you very much. Well, there's 5 minutes of our life we'll never get back. Thank you for that, Chris Hipkins. Mr. Speaker, today in this House I've seen it all. The so-called leader of the opposition, Andrew Little, put his hands up and say, I don't want to ask any questions. Hands up, giving up, not asking any questions. But then, of course, later on, he followed the Honourable Winston Peters to ask those questions. And that makes a lot of sense, because in the last poll that I saw, Winston Peters was higher in the preferred Prime Minister polls than Andrew Little was. So this is a theme about who the real leader of the opposition is. I guess we're not sure, Mr. Speaker, but Mr. Little puts his hands up and gives up. He's making it easier. But, Mr. Speaker, the country needs the Labour Party's help. Not so long ago, they announced a crisis in manufacturing. And what did we see in the very next quarter? Manufacturing increasing around the country, going from strength to strength. They announced a power price crisis. What happened there? Stabilisation of prices, haven't been moving up at all. A house price crisis in parts of regional New Zealand. Well, that's certainly not happening. Then we had the mythical house buyers with Chinese-sounding names crisis. Well, we can't find them. Interest rates crisis. Interest rates record low. A currency crisis, Mr. Speaker. Currency rates at a level that means our exports are competitive overseas. And then they announced a dairy crisis last week. And what did we see last night? A 20% increase in the price of wholesale milk powder. But there is one more crisis they need to announce on behalf of all New Zealanders, Mr. Speaker, and that's a crisis in the All Black camp, guaranteeing the All Blacks will win the Rugby World Cup this year. If they do that, then there's a chance that Mr. Little could sneak ahead of Mr. Peters in preferred Prime Minister states. But that would only be if he held that line. You see, if Mr. Little said there's a crisis in the All Blacks, well, tomorrow he'd change his mind. Because before the election, he was in favour of a referendum on the flag. In fact, he thought we should have a flag. Let's have a referendum. It's important that New Zealanders have a greater sense of pride in their own country. Yes, let's have a referendum. As soon as he's leader of the Labour Party, oh no, we shouldn't be having one of those at all. We can't have a referendum. It's not for New Zealanders to decide. But he doesn't like the national anthem. He thinks New Zealanders like the Australian national anthem. So guess what? Let's have a referendum on the national anthem. At least that was on one day in a speech in this House. The next day, no, we're not going to have a referendum anymore. Do you remember the means testing of New Zealand Super? That was certainly a brain fade. Let's means test New Zealand Super against hard-working New Zealanders. Winston Peters, as the real leader of the opposition, actually came out heavily against that straight away. He knows about politics. But, of course, that was only one day. The very next day, Mr. Little said, oh, no, we're not in favour of means testing anymore. So, on behalf of the New Zealand public, Mr. Little, a bit of consistency. Tomorrow afternoon, come down to this House, declare a crisis in the All Blacks and stick with it, because then they'll guarantee win the Rugby World Cup. But I think, Mr. Speaker, the disaffected many on the side of the Labour Party will overrule him, whatever he says there. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that's focused, and we're looking at the things that are important and that matter. Our economy is still strong. It goes up and it goes down, as dairy prices do and other things. But that member's actually the worst member in 50 years for the seat of Dunedin, but let's keep trying that one. But, Mr. Speaker, the thing is here, across our portfolios, ministers are working hard, and our other MPs are supporting and coming up with good ideas and new ideas for a third-term government. Now, in one of my responsibility areas of taxation, there's a lot of work underway. Business transformation. We have launched earlier this year 2 consultation documents to look at the future of taxation, including an announcement around provisional tax, PAYE for tax, PAYE for businesses. We consulted on it, we received responses, we're out in public talking about it. What did Mr. Little do? A few weeks ago, he announced a late submission to my consultation, PAYE for business. So what I would say to members opposite, a day's work is not Twitter. A day's work is not cutting and pasting from international magazines or newspapers. A day's work is not plagiarism. A day's work is what everyday New Zealand is doing up and down this country, and this is a government that's supporting them.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, in 2008, the new government started off with